I have always tried to exploit the photograph. I use it like color, or as the poet uses the word. Now that was a quote by Hannah Hoch, and Hannah Hoch is the artist that we are going to be studying today in art history. So Hannah Hoch is a German artist, and she is famous for her photo montage or her collage work using photographs. Now, she was a rare female practicing in the early part of the 20th century, and she was one of the only females active in the Dada movement, which we'll get into that a little more later on what the Dada movement is. She also consciously promoted the idea of women working creatively more generally in society. This was a time when women were expected to stay at home and cook dinner, and she kind of fought that. She used artwork to express different ideas for women in our world. Now, she explicitly addressed in her pioneering artwork in the form of photo montage, which I said is using different photos, 2 or more, to create a bigger image. And she focused on the issue of gender and the figure of women in modern society. So together today, we are going to dive into her life, into her artwork, and her legacy. But before we get started here, I have 3 key terms that I want you to remember. They're going to come up through our conversation today, and I just may quiz you on them in the end. So here they are. Dada. Photo montage. New woman era. All right, those are the 3 terms, everyone, so remember those. We are going to dive into the life and the artwork of Hannah Hoch. Hannah Hoch was born November 1st, 1889, into an upper middle class family in southeast Germany. Her father, Frederick, was the supervisor of an insurance company, while her mother, Rosa, was an amateur painter. She later claimed that her father believed a girl should get married and forget about studying art. Hannah was the eldest of 5 children. Her education began at the local girls' high school, but it ended early when she was only 15. Her parents needed her to stay home and look after her youngest sisters. Now, her education was only picked up again 6 years later at the age of 21, when in 1912 she joined the School of Applied Arts in Berlin. Here she studied glass design, discovering an interest in the applied arts and design that would inform her later practice. The school was closed at the first outbreak of World War I in 1914, and she returned home to join the Red Cross. She was able to return to Berlin in 1915 and studied graphic arts at the School of the Royal Museum of Applied Arts under Emil Orlik. In the same year, she met the Dadaist artist Raoul Hausmann. The pair went on to have an intense and stormy romantic relationship. Between 1916 and 1926, Hoch worked for the magazine and newspaper publishers Ullstein Verlag. She worked in the department dedicated to handicrafts and designed patterns for crochet, knitting, and embroidery. In 1918, she wrote a manifesto of modern embroidery, which encouraged Weimar women to pursue the spirit of their generation and to develop a feeling for abstract forms through their handiwork. In the same year, Hoch and Hausmann took a holiday to the Ostsee, where she later claimed to have discovered the concept of photo montage that would be fundamental to her artistic practice. They found images of German soldiers sent home to their families, with pictures of their faces pasted onto the bodies of musketeers. From these, she claimed she discovered the power of collage to alienate images. That is, to give them new meanings when placed in conjunction with new elements and in new context. So this inspired her. She thought, hey, I can take an image out of its context and make my own meaning, make my own saying to it. So now Hoch soon started to make the photo montage images for which she's best known. During the late 1910s and early 1920s, she was part of the Dada movement in Berlin. Now, Dada, this was a movement that began in Switzerland as a reaction to World War I. Its output was largely diverse, ranging from poetry to collage to stage performance to painting. It kind of encompassed a whole umbrella of art. Now, it is marked by its mockery of materialism and nationalism in a response to the war. Hoch is the only woman to have been involved among this group of creative innovators and would-be avant-garde cultural revolutionaries. But that distinction was often something of a double-edged sword. Now, her work was first exhibited at the first International Dada Fair in Berlin. But before the show's opening, George Grox and John Hartfield tried to stop her from being included. It was only when her lover, Raoul Haussmann, threatened to pull his own contributions from the exhibition that they relented. Dadaist Hans Richard's only memory of her is of the food she provided, writing in his memoirs of the sandwiches, beer, and coffee she managed somehow to conjure up despite the shortage of money. Now, although Hoch's aesthetic of borrowing from popular culture, dismemberment, and collage fitted well with that of the Dadaists, the union was an uneasy one. Not least because of the inherent sexism of the movement. She felt uncomfortable with the exhibition's element of the Dada circle, and she was embarrassed by the behavior of the other artists in this movement. It was all guys, and she didn't like their thoughts about women. She didn't like how they behaved in public. She didn't want to be part of this movement, even though her artwork fit into it. Even though her artwork was a little abstract, it was going against nationalism, it was going against materialism, it fit in the lines of Dada, it was going against cultural norms. She didn't want to be with those guys. She didn't want to be a member of that circle. So she left the circle, and in 1922 she actually ended her relationship with Raoul Haussmann, who was a member of the Dada movement circle. Now back to her photo montage. As I said, she borrowed from popular culture. She would typically take different body parts and add them onto each other. She collaged and she kind of tried to make a statement with it. So in these montages, she gathered images and text from popular forms of media such as newspapers and magazines, and she combined them in often uncanny ways, which were able to express her stances on important social issues of her time. The fact that images she included in her pieces were pulled from current newspapers and magazines, they gave her messages validity. Now this collage, this photo montage we're looking at, is one of Hoch's earliest works, and it's an ambitious collage. It's titled Beer Belly Cultural in Germany. And it is unusual for the size. This is what a lot of her work looks like, but it was rather large, and it measures 35 by 57 inches. Here she uses cuttings from newspapers and magazines to create one cohesive image out of a myriad of disparate parts. Now, this technique of taking words and images from the press to make new and subversive statements was highly innovative at her time. No one had really done that before. Now, this piece was first exhibited in the first International Dada Fair that took place in Berlin in 1920. We were just talking about that. She didn't like the rest of the guys at that exhibition. But it was one of the most popular pieces of the show. People talked about her artwork. It invoked feeling, just like art is supposed to do. Now, towards the end of the 1920s, Hoch started to make connections with other artists. As I said, she was trying to move herself away from that Dada circle. She became friends with Pierre Mondrian, and she became influenced by the De Stijl movement, who Mondrian is considered to be father of. Now, De Stijl, which simply means the style in Dutch, it emerged largely in response to the horrors of World War II. You know, the 1920s, we were responding to that first war, and a lot of our literature, artwork, music was in a response to that horrible time in our history. So this art movement, it was kind of a wish to remake society better in the aftermath of a world war. So viewing art as a means of social and spiritual redemption, the members of De Stijl embraced a utopian vision of art and its transformative potential. De Stijl was an abstract movement, and the artist espoused a visual language consisting of precise geometric forms, usually straight lines, squares, and rectangles, using primary colors. De Stijl artists aim to achieve a visual harmony in art by balancing shapes and color. And by achieving this in art, they hope to provide a blueprint for restoring order and balance to everyday life. Our world was turned upside down by a war, and they thought by creating this beautiful, simple form of art, we could reflect that into our everyday lives. Now, at this time, as she's meeting these new artists, kind of experimenting in a new movement, she settled in the Hague in the Netherlands. This was 1926, and she started a relationship with a Dutch writer. This couple lived together for the next decade or so. Now, during the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany in 1930, Hoch found herself under attack from the party as a producer of degenerate art. She was supposed to have an exhibition of her work at the Bauhaus School in 1932, but it was closed by the local Nazi council. She had been designated a cultural Bolshevik, along with many other Dadaists, but she returned to Berlin permanently in 1936. While other artists fled Germany, Hoch stayed in her own form of exile. She bought a house near Berlin and lived there throughout the Second World War, hoping that her neighbors would not guess her identity and give her away. Now, at this time, she had ended her relationship with that Dutch writer, and she married Kurt Matthias. He was a businessman and a piano player. They got married in 1938, and then they were divorced in 1944. Now, after the war, after World War II, Hoch broke many of her pre-war ties, both artistically and socially. Now, her work moved away from her figurative montages and kind of veered into a territory of abstraction, which was being explored by many artists at this time. This was the late 40s, 50s, going into the 60s. We were getting a little more abstract. We were experimenting, and she, was still fighting for what she believed was right in our culture, what was right for women, but she started, to just be a little more abstract and expressionist. Now, although she still produced work on a fairly prolific scale, her pieces from this era are less well known and generally less well received by critics. Now, she bought and lived in a small garden house in Berlin-Helgensee. This was a remote area on the outskirts of Berlin. Art historian Dawn Ades visited Hoch in her Berlin home in early 1970s and found that the artist was as interested in nature as she was in art. She recalls how you had to crawl under apple trees to get through the front door. She incorporated leaves and twigs and other organic material into her collages of the time. So in the timeline of Hoch here, we had her kind of starting in embroidery and crochet and knitting and learning how that was a handicraft of women. And she wrote a book encouraging women to express themselves through their art. Then she discovered photomontage and started taking pieces from newspapers and magazines and creating collage photomontages to empower women more. Especially in those photo montages, you may notice her putting like male and females together, kind of blending those gender lines. Then later in her life, she kind of secludes herself, especially after the war and having to hide herself because of her art. The Nazis claimed she was a degenerate. Her art was not okay. Women's rights were not okay at that time. So she hid, she isolated, and she turned to nature and started collaging more with nature. So her artwork really expresses the different times she had in her life, just like it does you and me. We create different things, we make different things depending on what's happening to us at that time of our life. Now, Hoch passed away in 1978 from natural causes in her beautiful Berlin house. And you can actually still go and visit today. She's got a beautiful garden. You can see those apple trees they talked about and see the nature collages she created at the end of her life. Now, though she is gone, not on this earth anymore, she left us a legacy. And what is that legacy that Hannah Hoch left? Now, her deliberate attempt to obscure herself during the Second World War and the fact that she continued to live in her modest home on the outskirts of Berlin until the end of her life may account for her relative obscurity. She never really did things the way other people did, and that's what made her her, and that's what made us like her artwork. She jumped outside of the box, and she inspired other people to live outside the box. Don't do what culture tells you to do. Do what you want to do, what makes you happy. The art historian, Dawn Ades, notes that she wasn't interested in becoming a celebrity, which kind of perhaps speaks to that early embarrassment she had in the Dada movement of those men. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted to create art and get people thinking in different ways in the world using her fine arts. Now, her pioneering work in photomontage was influential for many later artists, especially for women artists. These include her near contemporaries, German-born Gret Stern and surrealist artist Claude Cahun, as well as later artists such as Cindy Sherman. Also, her style didn't just influence visual artists, but it influenced musicians. Her cut up aesthetic, like all those collages we were just looking in, cut up, you can tell they're cut and pasted. Well, that look is a big look of the punk movement. And in the early 1980s, right after her death, people kind of took her cut out photomontage look and made it the image of the punk movement. And the punk music movement is a huge movement for women as well. You hear a lot of women empowerment songs in punk music. So she influenced not only art but music and further movements for women. It's safe to say that Hoch created a body of work that is very important for understanding the media culture of the Weimar Republic in Germany, German gender identities, and gender relations inside the Berlin Dada movement. So pretty much, Hannah Hoch is an awesome lady. She used visual arts to express her feelings, express her beliefs, and she just taught ladies that, you know, you don't have to be what cultural says a lady has to be. She inspired women to do what they want, not just what everyone expects you to do, and to find new ways to express yourself and be happy through your life. So thank you, Hannah Hoch, for making our world more beautiful, getting us to think outside of the box. All right, that was the life, the legacy, the artwork of Hannah Hoch. And now that we have swam on through it, it's time to take everything we just learned and put it onto paper. So I'm going to flip this camera around. You grab either just a blank piece of paper, grab your art journal if you have one, and also grab a magazine. We just talked about a photo montage artist, right? So you betcha we're going to do a little cutting out of magazines and pasting into our art journal today. So let me flip this around and I'll show you how it's done. All right, so you have a blank piece of paper out in front of you, your art journal, whatever you're using today. Let's put what we learned onto paper. So we're going to start with those terms. Well, let's start with her name. We got Miss Hannah Hoch. That is H-A-N-N-A-H. And Hoch, H-O-C-H. And what were our terms? We had Dada. Now that was the first movement. She's kind of associated with a movement after World War I. We talked about two movements that happened right after World War I. They were short-lived, but both of them were kind of trying to pick up after our world went to war. How can we use art, visual art, to kind of change our ideas, change our culture after war? So that is what the Dada movement was. It was kind of, more about fighting the cultural standards, which is something Hoch did with her collage. She fought how women were perceived in our culture. Our second term was photo montage, and we looked at a whole bunch of those today. It's collage, but with photos. So at least taking two or more photos, cutting them apart, and pasting them together to create a whole other image. And then our last one was the New Woman era. Now, the New Woman era, I mean, Hannah was very active in challenging the status of women in the social world, excuse me. And she used her work to promote the New Woman era. I just noticed I didn't put an N at the end of woman. So this was after World War I, and then after World War II, kind of, we had a whole kind of civil rights movement throughout the world about what really is a woman's place, what a woman can and can't do, and she used her artwork to really fight and put her word out for what she thought a woman should do. So, all right, today I told you to grab a magazine because we are going to try a little photo montage. So I cut out some random pictures, and she used a lot of human shapes in hers, didn't she? She did collage with a lot of pictures of humans. She used a lot of words, so you can cut out some words as well. Tear out some pictures, cut them out. Just give it a try. But I want you to kind of mix them up. So I've got a body here, I got a head here. This is going to be kind of funny looking because I'm going to have a little pug woman there. Look at that. And then I got my yoga lady here. I think I'm going to put maybe this T right up here like she's reaching up to it. So yes, today I want you to experiment with photo montage. I want you to take photos out of a magazine. I want you to glue them down, tape them down, however you can get them into your sketchbook. But I want you to try it out, and you can, be a little more intricate than I'm being here. You can try more. I want you to at least have 2 photos, because to be a montage you need at least 2. But you can cut out different words to go along with these images. You can cut out more pictures. Just try her techniques there. You saw some of her big ones. She had a lot of different images, but it's not necessarily just laying these images side by side like a collage. Photo montage is actually putting 2 images into one. Like how I took this body and I put a dog head on it. How I'm taking this body and I'm balancing a cup of tea on her hands and feet. So that's what makes photo montage different than collage, actually, because collage can just be side by side, but montage is actually creating one thing out of multiple things. So there's my my dog person and my yoga tea lady. I can't wait to see what you guys all come up with. Well, everybody out there, I really hope that you enjoyed learning about the life artwork of Hannah Hoch. And I hope that it inspired you in your own work. It is wonderful to study these artists, to learn about them, and to try their styles, because this is how you find your own style in your artwork, is by copying and learning from the greats. So again, I hope you learned something new. I hope this was fun for you, and I hope to see you again next time, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care, and happy creating to you all. Bye.